Hello, Peter Robinson.
Hello.
It's lovely to see you.
You too.
Okay. I seem to be, excuse me, losing my voice in this pandemic for some reason. I don't
Oh
know
dear.
why. So I'm sorry I sound like a frog.
Well, you've been talking to so many people.
That's probably part of it. And part of it is just my advancing age, but here I am. So tell us about you. You are sheltering in Toronto, right?
Yes, we're in Toronto at the moment. It's pretty quiet here, just like everywhere else. We were up at the cottage. We have a cottage on a lake up north, and in sort of mid-March we went up there, and we came out last week because I had to pick up some prescriptions. We've got to do taxes, but we're hoping to go back next week. So we'll be up at the lake all summer, I hope.
Well, that sounds lovely. I know normally, excuse me, at this time of year, you're in England. Actually, you're in York, right? Yorkshire.
Yeah, we had a flight booked for the 22nd of March, but obviously it didn't work out. I'd like to have gone, but I think we would have got stuck there if we'd gone. Things have got really quite bad over there, and they keep changing their mind as far as the rules go. Now they're talking about anyone who goes after June the 8th being quarantined for 2 weeks. I mean, it's okay for us if that happened over there because we've got a house there. But I'm quite, I'm glad we didn't actually go there. I'm glad we're still here. It's not a bad place to be through all this.
Well, it does make more sense. We have a lot of Canadians who live in Scottsdale, and they all had to go home because there's a real problem with the healthcare and insurance for Canadians out of the country.
Yes.
So, it really might be just as well for that reason also that you didn't make the flight.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. We don't actually have a doctor in Yorkshire. We don't have a GP. Obviously, if there's an emergency, you can go to emergency, but here's where all our medical stuff is, so it makes sense to be here.
But it's hard for you because you, like me, you travel a lot, and I suggested that we could review that. But before we do, I went to my own personal bookcase and I pulled out 3 books. Look at this lovely book.
Oh, the first one. Yes.
The very first one, and you autographed it. I'm trying to remember if you came here for this or if I found you somewhere, because I've read you in real time and we've sold your books as you have written them from the very beginning.
I may have been there. I mean, I know I went to 1 or 2 places down in the States for the first book because I'd already was on my 4th book up here by the time it came out there. So I'm not sure exactly when we met, but I know it's a long time ago.
Well, I am reasonably sure that you were here for Gallows View. Now I have my autographed copy of the 2nd book, the American edition of A Dedicated Man.
Mm-hmm.
So that was lovely. And then, voila, The Hanging Valley.
Well.
Well, one of the reasons I did this, because I thought it was interesting. I want you to look at the difference. I'm not sure how clear it is, but look at the difference in size. Gallows View is a really nice and small, compact book. And then Hanging Valley, they moved you up into this much larger size. Do you remember a discussion about that? I mean, why they did?
No, I don't know why they did it. I suppose should have felt better that they were making bigger books, but I don't know that it made a great deal of difference.
Well,
they don't go symmetrically on my shelves.
No, they don't. But I do think it's a publisher vote of confidence in a way that, they put them up. And for a long time, this larger size prevailed. And now I'm seeing all kinds of different sizes. I think my understanding of it was, which I've always thought was interesting, that they developed this larger size because it displayed better at Barnes and Noble. But today, in a JPEG area and online sales and so forth, the size is much less relevant.
Yeah.
So what does your English publisher do? I don't normally see your British copies until we got up to, Gosh, I'm trying to remember when you started spending the summer in England, and you started bringing in your books from the UK rather than the US edition as
Yeah,
a
so
autograph.
you see them now, so you know what kind of size and shape they are. You know, they've got quite a good system of cover design. They follow a certain pattern, and once in a while they change it, but not that often. So the books sort of have the same look. It's changed when I went from Macmillan to Hodder, and a little bit since I've been with Hodder, but not a great deal. They're quite recognizable.
They are. So what's up with Inspector Banks? Will it make a difference that you're going to be in Canada this summer and not, in fact, in England?
No, really, because this was supposed to be the start of my year off. I mean, I don't mean I'm not going to do anything, but I mean, I didn't have to hand in a book at this time next year. So I have a year that I could take 2 years to write a book rather than 1 year. But I just finished the next one, and that will be ready to send off to the publishers in a week or two. And after that, I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. I'll cast around for a few ideas.
Well, you've done a few standalones. I particularly enjoyed one.
Hmm.
I think the most recent standalone had a really unusual plot. I know you sent one in California, a long time
Yes.
back, right?
Yeah.
So does Banks deserve an occasional holiday while you dream up another story?
I think he does. That it's a good chance that the next one I do will be a standalone. The one I've just finished is the third part of a trilogy. So, I've really put him through it over the course of 3 books, and I think we both need a rest.
So, what effect did the TV series have on your sales? Was it noticeable, or were you so well established that it really didn't make a whole big difference?
I don't think it had a huge effect on immediate sales, but it did probably make me better known, in the sense that more people had heard of me, the media had heard of me. I probably got more interviews, more reviews, that kind of thing. But in terms of actual, TV to sales, I can't say I noticed a huge increase.
I really enjoyed the photography. I thought they did a beautiful job with Yorkshire, which is, after all, a main character in the
Yeah.
books. I do think that when they ended it, they precluded your going on with it. I don't want to do spoilers for anybody who didn't watch it, but I thought the last episode pretty much said, they certainly couldn't continue, at least with the series as you've been writing it.
Well, I tell everybody how it ended and say, that wasn't my ending.
No, I knew it wasn't your ending, but I thought it was theirs, and
There
I
are people accuse me of doing it sometimes.
no, really?
Yeah.
Oh, it's never wise for an author to kill off a main character. I mean, why would you do that?
No.
No. The casting was interesting. I liked Andy. I know that there was some, discussion about the lead, whose name I'm not recalling at the moment, that played Max, but I grew to like him as I watched it.
I think that's what happened for a lot of people. I mean, Annie was terrific, and Andrea, the actress, she was lovely, and Stephen also, Stephen Tompkinson, who played Banks, would not have been my first choice for the character. I mean, not just because he was tall, but I mean, he could play short if he wanted. He's a good enough actor. But I think that you're not going to get a character, an actor that pleases everyone. We all have our different ideas of what Banks looks like, and there's no way you're going to please anyone. This may have pleased less people than someone else may have done, but I think that a lot of people like me grew used to him over the series, and I thought he really did a great job of creating the character, and a
I
lot of it was his creation. It wasn't just what I wrote. He brought a lot of himself to it.
I thought so too. As I said, I grew fonder of him. But I've always been attached to Yorkshire I mean, it's sort of like Tony Hillerman. I really love his characters, but a big reason to read Tony Hillerman was always about the Navajo reservation and its unique features.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I've always thought that the Banks, so much of it is Yorkshire, even though occasionally you've taken him away. He's done some work in London and other places, but it's all rooted in Yorkshire.
Yeah, and I like that sense of place. I mean, like, you know, like you, I often enjoy a series partly because of where it's set. I've enjoyed, obviously, LA Private Eye series, and I've recently been rereading some of Robert Parker's Spencer books in Boston. And, you know, for me, the setting is a part of the story. And some writers obviously give you much more detail to go on, others a little bit less, but you can fill the blanks in yourself. I mean, I think as a reader, you need to do a little bit of work to fill out the picture that you've got there. We all bring our own minds to books.
Well, I've spent a lot of time in Yorkshire. I think I might
Yeah.
have told you that years ago, before I started the Poison Pen, I spent several months in England on what I called my National Trust tour. But I spent a lot of time in Yorkshire, and I still remember staying in a very small hotel in the Bootham Bar Gate. And I deliberately booked the top floor because you were over the walls and over the city looking directly at York Minster. And
Yeah.
when the bells rang, there was a real medieval effect, you know, as though you were staying in the ancient city. Um, but other parts of Yorkshire are wonderful too, and especially the valleys, which you know you've sent banks all over. So it's really it's amazing. Are there any like tours of Yorkshire that follow Alan Banks?
No, I don't think there are. I do remember talking to some people at one time up in Yorkshire about them organizing a tour, but I don't think anything ever came of it. I mean, people do their own, but there's no. And there used to be a sort of crime festival thing at St Hilda's College in Oxford. And I remember once I was there that there were a lot of Americans who were on a tour, and that was part of their tour. And they were going up to Yorkshire and they were going to see Banks country. So, you know, it was part of that. But there were no specialized tours of Banks's world. Might be a nice idea.
Well, maybe when things go from before, now we say in capital B, before, to after, that's a thought. You know, the St. Hilda's thing is still going on. It's virtual this year because I've been to it
Ah, yes, of
several
course.
times. Val McDermott, who's a longtime friend, went to St. Hilda's, and I think I've attended maybe 5 or 6
Hmm.
crime weekends there. P.D. James was also a frequent speaker at those conferences.
I remember, yeah. The last time I was there, she was, you know, the time before last, she was still alive, and I had to deliver a sort of 40-minute, slightly academic paper as they do there. And she was sitting in the front row. I was just terrified. I think she fell asleep at one point.
I could well believe it. You know, one of my best memories of Phyllis, Harry Keating once organized a dinner when Rob and I were in London, and he said, well, Phyllis will be dropping in right over my husband's head. But I went, oh my gosh, you know, am I going to really sit here and have dinner conversation with P.D. James? But my best moment with her, I was at a meeting of the Detection Club as a guest at
Hmm.
the Savoy Hotel, I think it was. And
Yeah.
at one point, as one does when drinking lots of tea and other things, I excused myself to visit the ladies' loo. And there she was, sitting on a bench. Oh, she said, you know, Barbara, how nice to see you. And I sat down on the floor and we talked for like 30 minutes. I think she had grown bored with the meeting. And so she was hanging out, so to speak. But I remember how, you know, how really out of body experience it felt like to me to be actually just chatting with her in the ladies' bathroom at the Savoy.
Yeah.
So I can see why you would have been.
She's very down to earth.
Yeah, no, she was. She was lovely. She had a secretary. She wrote everything out longhand, and then she had her secretary, you know, input it. But I thought she was a remarkable woman and
Yeah,
truly stayed on top of her game virtually to the end of her long life.
that's right. And I understand there's a sort of novella coming out in summer. At least it's advertised on Amazon.
Wow. Well, let's talk about travel. Last time I emailed you, you were heading to South Georgia
Yeah.
in the South Atlantic. Now, that's an interesting destination. Why so?
Well, we took a cruise to Antarctica. Basically, we were supposed to go um, first of all Falkland, South Georgia, and then Antarctica, but they changed it at the last minute, so we went the other way around. So we went to Antarctica first, the peninsula, then we came to South Georgia, and then the Falklands last. That was a fantastic trip. I mean, it's may well be a once in a lifetime given the way things are going now. I'm glad we went then. And then in February, we decided we'd had enough of Canadian winters, so we spent a month in Nevis and had a wonderful time. It's a very quiet, peaceful sort of place. I got a lot of writing done, and we booked to go back next year, but whether we'll get there or not, I don't know.
Well, it's early to say. Now, I have
Yeah,
been to the Falklands 3 times
yeah,
and Antarctica once across the straits down there. I'm trying to remember. And when we went, our cruise ship had a stabilizer knocked out, and it was incredibly rough. And there was a typhoon, and we ended up hiding behind Elephant Island, and everyone on the ship was reading a copy of Endurance. It was it was
yeah.
so far. But the point of the Falklands became, after one visit anyway, to see penguins, but also if you were a birder. And is that not
Yeah.
true of South Georgia?
Oh yes, yeah. I mean, I'm no expert birder, I mean, much as I enjoy watching them, but we did have some of the guides who were, terrific, and they would point things out that you just wouldn't see unless you were really looking for them. So yeah, I mean the penguins, of course, but many other kinds of birds down there.
Yeah, well, the rockhoppers, you had to bucket across the Falklands, and it was like a World
Yeah.
War II leftover convoy or something to see them. But, I don't know if you read Sharon Bolton, formerly S.J. Bolton, but now writing as Sharon, but she has a new book out called The Split, and the whole thing takes place in South Georgia. It's a really interesting book. Do you know her at all?
Yes, I do. I read about that book, and when we were down there, we went to an old whaling station called Gripviken, and it was just such an eerie experience that I thought how wonderful it would be to set a book down there. And one of the people on the cruise was an art director for television, and he was saying how great it would be to make a TV thing. So, we decided, well, we'll collaborate, we'll do something. I'll come up with an idea. And now Sharon's gone and written this book, so it kind of put me off it for a while. I'd have to go back there first again too. So who knows whether it'll happen or not? But
Well,
yeah, I want to read it. Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I did.
It's always hard to get visual cues on Zoom. Maybe you should hold up our hand. So I'm sorry, finish your thought and then I'll carry on.
No, I was just saying I put off the idea of writing anything about it myself, but I certainly do plan on reading Sharon's book.
Well, one of the reasons I thought it was interesting, and maybe this story needed South Georgia at the moment, it's hard to find a place that is that remote anymore where you can do a kind of like Treasure Island thing, and really have people with little or no communication or supply lines and create a story, that is made more difficult and more thrilling by the fact that the people are so isolated. Maybe it's a step up on the country house murder.
It is, yeah. It's a very limited number of suspects,
Yes, and
unless
extra danger.
unless the penguin did it.
Well, the book's called The Split, and I really
Hmm.
recommend it. It just came out here, and I enjoyed it. But some time ago, Peter, I remember that you wrote an Australian line into one of I think it was a banks, and
Yeah.
happened to specify the particular Australian line. What was the outcome of that? It was really nifty.
Well, when I went to Australia, my publishers gave me one weekend off, and I went to Barossa Valley, and they put me up at a place that was really in the middle of nowhere. I don't drive, so the driver picked me up at Adelaide Airport and dropped me off. There's nobody there. There's no check-in. There was a door with a key in it and a little note for me. No shops, like nothing for miles around. So I phoned the publishers, and I just heard that this was the layman's, the wine people had, you know, been thrilled that they were mentioned in the book. So we got in touch with them, and about 10 minutes later, Margaret Lehman phoned me up and said, "Where are you?" I told her. She said, "Well, what are you doing there?" I said, "I'll be over in 10 minutes." And she came roaring up and screeching on the gravel. And, you know, they basically took me in for the weekend, showed me the valley, gave me lots of wonderful wine. And we've been friends ever since, except Peter died 2 or 3 years ago, but I'm still in touch with Margaret. So it was an interesting outcome.
I think the lemon wines are delicious. When I was there with my daughter Susan, there's a part of Sydney called the Rocks, which
Yes.
is a lot of little, you know, cafes and shops and all, but wine tastings. And I remember that we sat down. It was her graduation present from high school, so she was just old enough to drink. And we did a wine flight at one of these, or maybe it was a wine tasting, I can't remember which. And anyway, the lemon wines were absolutely delicious. So now that you can import them easily or buy them easily here, we drink a fair amount of them. Are there any others that you would recommend from Australia?
I'd look around, you know, whenever I go to the liquor store here in Toronto, see what's imported, see what's new. Wakefield is quite good. It's another brand. You know, there are so many different ones, and you probably get ones that we don't get too.
Yeah, well, we're closer. So,
A little bit, a little bit.
right. No, actually, Australian wines are very big in restaurants here. But you know, it was interesting. We did a train trip. Actually, it was a British company. I can't remember the name of it, but with some friends, a train trip from Stockholm north up into Lapland, and then we crossed over to Norway at Narvik and came down the whole coast. But I remember Narvik, there was a pizza place or there was a cafe. Those were our two dinner choices. And, you know, Rob, my husband, the gourmet, thought the pizza place in Narvik, Norway wasn't going to work. So we went out and cased the cafe, which turned out to be this gorgeous restaurant. It was only called a cafe because I don't know why they serve coffee, but it was nothing like a cafe. But anyway, we went in back for dinner. And I realized that all around Norway, the only wine they really served, white wine, was Sancerre, which I thought was fascinating. But I suspect it had to do with this supply line more than anything else.
I didn't know that.
Have you traveled in Scandinavia much?
Yeah, and I certainly haven't been far north. I've just been to the main places. We were in Gothenburg for the book fair last September, I think. Year before, I was at that festival in Gotland, just off the coast from Stockholm, and spent a few days in Stockholm as well. So that's about all I really know of it. And I've been to Oslo and been to Denmark a couple of times.
You know, Norway is just exceptionally beautiful. The big fjord countries are really Norway, Chile, and Alaska. And I've been lucky to see all three of them, but their geography is quite similar. But I think in many ways, Norway is the most spectacular.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. We've never. That's a place we've never been, and it's obviously a cruise waiting to happen when cruises start happening again. I was supposed to be going next Wednesday to Tallinn for a literary festival in Estonia, but of course it's been cancelled. So I won't be
That
going
is
there.
too bad. Yeah, Tallinn is wonderful. I remember it very well. It's like Bruges. It's one of those cities that was too poor to modernize over centuries, and so it's arrived in this century, you know, as basically a relic of the past. But it's turned out to be a wonderful tourist mecca and, you know, income source, I think, for the people that live there. I can also tell you that it has one Michelin starred restaurant featuring duck and cherries, which Rob, of course, with his like a dowser, you know, he really is. He's like a restaurant whisperer or something. We ended up having lunch in the only Michelin restaurant in Tallinn, Estonia, in part because we'd had an accident with a pastry and I was so pissed he went inside to replace it and then discovered that you could actually eat there.
Well, I was there. I spent about 10 days there teaching a course at summer school, few years ago, and I set part of a book there after that. I was doing research while I was there, and lived way at the top of the old town. And you're right, it's a beautiful old place. But as soon as you get out of that old town area, you get all the Stalinist architecture, the concrete blocks and the rows and rows of them, all that sort of horrible utilitarian stuff. But the city center, the old town, is gorgeous.
It is. It's a lot like St. Petersburg, you can, there's some of it in the heart of it, and then you have to drive through all of that Stalinist architecture in order to get out to the Katharinehof and the Peterhof, which it turns out are rebuilt because the Germans, pretty much leveled all those beautiful palaces outside the city. But it is a real contrast, the Stalinist architecture with the older and more beautiful parts. We were lucky. We spent a week at the Hermitage. There was a company that organized through the Friends of the Hermitage Museum. And we went, and we had a choice of going in October or December. And we had been there in the summer. So I said to Rob, if we're going to go back to St. Petersburg, why don't we go in December when it'll be a lot more like, authentic.
Russia.
Yes. And what it turned out, which I thought was hilarious, we landed at 7 p.m. from our Lufthansa flight nonstop from Frankfurt into this frightful blizzard. And it turned out that they had no real snow clearing equipment, and the road from St. Petersburg to Moscow was filled with stranded motorists, and they were taking like relays of hot soup and coffee out to them and stuff. And I thought to myself, I wonder if that whole, Russian sleds, and they were able to navigate snow better in the horse and buggy day or the sled day than they can now. I thought it was fascinating. Yeah.
That's a place I haven't been. Sheila's been there, but with our granddaughter, but I haven't been there yet. So that's on my list too.
Make a really interesting standalone. You could do a lot with all of that. So I did have one question for you because you wrote about it, so it's public knowledge. But when you were traveling, I think you were in the west of Canada, you had an incident with your heart and had to be treated, and you turned that into a book. But have you found that travel to totally remote places is a little more frightening as we're getting older?
No, really. I tend not to think about it too much, unless every little ache or pain I have used to be a heart attack, but now it's coronavirus. Not that I'm a hypochondriac or anything, but I was very lucky because I was in Banff, which is a small ski town in Alberta, and it was a Sunday afternoon. I just didn't feel very well. There was no sledgehammer or anything like that. And one of the volunteers was a retired doctor, and she said, well, let's get you checked out. Come on, I'll take you down to, and I said, no, I want to do my reading and then go and lie down. And she said, no, come on. So she drove me to the hospital emergency, and there was nobody there except the doctor, bored silly because they had no patients. And I was straight down on the stretcher, ECG, and he said, you're having a heart attack. So that was it.
Well, I mean, you were fortunate you were in a place where they actually had an ER. We
Yes.
used to do a lot of really long cruises. And then a few years back, we were on a cruise from Miami to Barcelona via Bermuda and Mallorca, I think it was, in Gibraltar, which I'd always wanted to see. And my husband was not feeling well. It turned out he didn't have a heart attack, but they believed he had. And they evacuated him off the cruise ship, which was a really terrifying thing, to a little community hospital in the Azores, which was never going to work, and he had to be transferred to Lisbon.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had quite the same feeling, about like sailing across the Pacific out of sight of land and, medical help ever since.
Yeah. If anything happens, you're stuck. And we were thinking about getting that insurance that gets you repatriated if there's a problem, so you don't end up in a little village hospital in the Azores. You get flown back to Toronto if you're capable of doing it. But I don't know how travel business is going to go in the future. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens next.
Well, we do. Rob signed us up for our 30th wedding anniversary is on my 80th birthday in December. And we signed up to do a 40-day round trip cruise from Christchurch, New Zealand to Sydney, to Hobart, Tasmania, and down to Antarctica and the other hemisphere. But I'm not A, sure that that will happen, and B, I'm not sure I really want to be on a small ship, you know, in such a remote place, because I don't know how bulletproof we could any of us be from the
Yeah.
virus anymore.
Yeah, it's a frightening thought. Yeah.
It is. Well, on a more cheerful note, what's Sheila up to? I know she's retired, so are you guys enjoying, you know, whatever you're enjoying?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the annoying thing is not so much that we went out all the time, and I'm used to being at home. I've worked at home for years, you know. It's the fact that you can't do anything else rather than you particularly want to. It'd be nice to be able to go out to dinner and stuff like that, but we're doing fine. I mean, I just finished the book, and at the moment Sheila's reading it, so that's keeping her busy.
It's
And she's
handy.
got a number of other projects on her. She's learning French and, you know, doing a few other things too.
That's wonderful. I find Duolingo is really a wonderful application you can put on your phone and learn a new language. But how lucky for you that you have a lawyer on tap to read your books.
Well, yeah, I wish she'd done criminal law, but, you know, you can't have everything.
Well, you know what? You can construct some pretty decent plots out of stuff. You know, I mean, I realize that there's pressure to have a murder in every book, but what leads up to it could actually be a lot of, you know, what basically civil law.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, do you do you do you have anything that you'd like to recommend to people? Anything you've read recently that you think would be worth mentioning?
Well, recently I've mostly been sort of rereading old thrillers like Robert Parker, Lee Child, and stuff like that. I can't seem to really concentrate. You know, I thought this would be a great time for reading, the lockdown and all that, but yeah, I tend to watch more television than read. But I'd read some Fred Vargas lately, which I enjoyed. You know, I hadn't read before, and you know, there's some English writers. One problem is that a lot of them are not available in America, especially some of the northern ones, like M.W. Craven and A.A. Dan from Bradford. They're not published in the US, so there's no point in me recommend. You might have them, but you know, most places wouldn't.
We do actually. I'm very fond of the Craven books, and I was pleased that he won the Gold Dagger for his second book. His agent, David Headley, we do a lot of work with him, and so it's not surprising that we would actually carry the Cravens. But I had a nice visit with Ian Rankin about
Oh
10
yeah.
days ago, and one of the questions certainly that's coming up in the pandemic is publication dates, whether to stick to them, whether to shift them. I mean, this was last year was his year off. You're lucky that your timing to have a year off from actually having a book published is a fortunate thing.
Well, I mean, what's maybe unfortunate is it was supposed to come out in the UK in September, and now they've put it off until spring in next March. So I mean, that you know, that's fine with me. I don't know how things will be in terms of authors touring even next March. I mean, I have no idea. But obviously, the fall is going to be pretty crowded with books that are being put off at the moment. So it's going to be a strange market for the next year or so, anyway.
It will be. There are lots of books that we're publishing this month and in June that have been advanced. Um, and in America, as it happened, because of the election, publishers were not keen to publish a lot between the two conventions and election date because, you know, the media would be consumed as it
Mm-hmm.
continually is. And so there was a lot of vacant space, in point of fact, where they could move books. But so many of them have moved that it's turning out that what looked like a really quiet time, August and September, are going to be just crazy. But I don't know what effect that will have next spring. You haven't toured the US in a really long time. Is HarperCollins here going to coincide, and might you actually come to visit?
I don't know. I mean, I'd love to get back again. I haven't been there for years. No, I used to. It all stopped in 2008. You know, as soon as the financial crash came, publishers stopped touring me. and I haven't really been back since, except on visits. So I don't know whether it's going to start again. I would doubt it, because certainly whatever else the virus leaves, it's going to leave a pretty damaged economy.
Well, I'm trying to be optimistic about it. So maybe you and I, we've been friends forever. Maybe we can just arrange, a tour of Scottsdale for you, which would be wonderful. There are all kinds of things you could do. You could teach a couple of writers classes. We could, we could really make it worth your while. And the thing about Zoom, Peter, that's we're finding interesting, because as you've seen, we're doing like, one event a day or two every day. There are no geographical boundaries to this. It doesn't really matter like it did on a book tour, the community you're in. So in fact, were you to come here, one event on Zoom or a virtual event, however we do it, is really essentially the same as a book tour, because people from all over can turn into it. And it does propagate sales across a lot of bookstores. It also drives sales, to the online vendors as well. But it does at least give you a platform to talk to fans that, and we're finding we're getting offers to host authors that we would never ever have seen. And 6 months ago, nobody would have even thought of sending some of them here. And now all of a sudden they're raining down on us. Because we are established as being able to do this kind of thing. So, I'm sure we could work something out, but I really miss you. I still have, she won't need them anymore, but I still have Sheila's headphones that she left behind when you and she spent Thanksgiving with us. And Lord, when was that? It was like 2006.
Yeah, I bought her some new ones. No, of course we'll come down to see you. And I was just talking about, tours in general, that's probably unlikely to happen. But yes, we'll, when things get back to normal again, we'll find a nice cold time of the Canadian year to come down and see you in Scottsdale.
That would be lovely. There actually were, I don't know if there still are, nonstop flights from Toronto to Scottsdale. To Phoenix anyway, which was really handy. Well, it's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to put this on our homepage, and then Patrick will put it up on Facebook in a few days. So when we do, I'll send you the link, and people who've missed you will be happy to have a chance to listen to us talk.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks very much, Mama. Say hi to Rob.
I will do it. Thank you, Peter. I love to Sheila. It was lovely to talk with you. Bye.
Bye-bye.